let's talk for and about the LGBT communities around the world. I'm Michael Ross, and this is Straight Friendly. Welcome back to the Straight Friendly Global Podcast. In this special episode, which is actually split to two different episodes, we're gonna do some role changing. And Jonathan, our production assistant, is gonna become the host of a podcast, and he's gonna interview your host, meaning he's gonna interview me. We're gonna talk about the different episodes we had so far this year, about the story of how this podcast started, summarizing the first year that we are working together with the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom in Jerusalem, what allowed us to produce so many episodes in English. And some of more opinions and thoughts, things that we could not put with inside those episodes that you know. So stay with us for this special episode summarizing this year. The production of this episode came to reality thanks to the support of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom in Jerusalem. And also thanks to our team, our production assistant, Jonathan Elkhoury, Sharon Agri, and our sound editor, Zach Aviad.
So here's the deal. I took the liberty as the production assistant of this podcast to pick 4 different topics from the episodes that we uploaded this year. And I wanted it to be some sort of a conclusion of a year. And I wanted to talk about you, Michael, because you always ask our guests about themselves, about why they're doing what they're doing. And in some sort of a way, we didn't really hear it from you.
Why? We did talk about it in the first episode and with some of our guests. No?
Yeah, but only like a little bit. So that's why I want this episode to be completely about you.
Oh, maybe we can do the episode about you, Mr. Jonathan Elkhoury, our production assistant.
One day we can make it.
Shall we tell them how it all started? How did we get to know each other?
Do you want to say it?
Well,
is it my version or your version of how things happened?
Let's start with yours. We said this episode is about you, no?
No, it's about you.
Okay, so in order that I will feel comfortable, I need you to start.
Okay, so basically, so our listeners don't really know me. Just like the title, Jonathan Elkhoury, I'm the production assistant of Straight Friendly Global. And this is basically one part of what Michael does. That is part of...
you can call me Michael.
You prefer Michael?
You can call me Misha, Michael, Miguel. Let's make it Miguel.
Michael is in Arabic. We can go with that.
Michael, السلام عليكم. اسمي ميخائيل الروس وأنا ساكن في مدينة الخيفة في الدولة الإسرائيل. طيب?
Pretty good.
شكرا.
Nice.
I had an ex-boyfriend who was Palestinian.
Who was an Arab?
Israeli-Palestinian.
Yeah.
Arab. He was.
And now you're living in
For
Haifa.
me, he's dead. So he was. Okay? He's not living anymore on this planet. Okay?
He's not existing anymore.
Which is actually kind of the things which I'm less talking about in the global version of the podcast, because this whole thing started after starting to produce the Israeli version in Hebrew, the country where we are producing the podcast. And, once I started doing the Straight Friendly Global, especially this year, and also thanks to the support that we started to receive with our first sponsor and partner with the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom in Jerusalem. So it allowed us to produce the podcast in English. It allowed us to hire more people like you. Mm-hmm. We definitely need much more budgets. The whole idea was that we will start with videos. I always, when I was watching the telly, I always wanted to get to that day that I will have a podcast where I will be able to say telly, just like in those British BBC programs. But much of my inspiration actually comes from watching the BBC and National Geographic, Discovery Channel, the History Channel.
You're kind of getting ahead of what I wanted to do in this episode.
Okay.
This is basically what is this episode is about.
Okay.
So you mentioned the podcast in Hebrew, Straight Friendly Israel. You have a lecture as well that you talk about the gay, since ancient times till today, about the gay revolution around the world.
There's a book that one day will be published.
Amen to that. You're working on a book. So there's a lot of things that you're doing. And I don't know that a lot of people knows what really like made you do that. It's not just about the money, because there's no money from it.
Oh. Well, there is some, and it was really, once initiating this whole stuff, I had to learn by myself how to manage business, how to do finances, how to recruit people, and so on and so on. And I'm still learning a lot. Today, somehow I'm also mentoring other entrepreneurs. But yeah, basically I created and did what I felt like no one is doing. This whole thing was supposed to start as an NGO thing or within one of the LGBT NGOs in our country, but they didn't want to. We were just listening before starting to record. We were just listening to that song of Queen.
Yeah.
What's the name of the song? Do you remember?
It's like the 7 minute.
Staying alive, staying alive.
Staying alive.
and before that, like we were listening to more songs of but no, this is the Bee Gees. I'm sorry, but look, if we're not talking about Madonna or Lady Gaga, I don't know really the names of who are the people I'm listening to. Is that RuPaul? No, it's not RuPaul. Okay, so this is something of all the rest, all the hetero.
Oh my God!
But you know,
such
also
a bad gay.
I've been told several times that I'm a bad gay. A few years ago, when I lived in New York and studied there for a semester, I was watching all the time Bob the Drag Queen. And way before RuPaul's Drag Race, I had no idea what RuPaul's Drag Race. And suddenly he disappeared and he was not performing anymore. And then I was asking people there, do you know why Bob is not performing anymore? And they were like, he's in RuPaul's Drag Race. I was like, what is this thing that I cannot pronounce? What is RuPaul's Drag Race? I said, you're not a real gay.
Yeah, you know, I discovered RuPaul's Drag Race last year because of COVID. So we stayed at home a lot, and suddenly like, what is this thing that is always appearing on my like preferred things? Let's watch it. And I'm like, wow, interesting.
And now since you're helping me also with marketing stuff and all that, and I don't know if you saw, but I started to clean a bit my Instagram account, and I just found there posts of me writing about RuPaul's Drag Race 3 years ago. Actually, now that we are celebrating, Jonathan, I don't know if you know, but you know that Mother has arrived. We're now recording in December 2021. Do you know that we are celebrating officially 3 years?
Really?
This month.
Congratulations.
Oh. Where is Mother? Sometimes people ask me about the name, like Mother has arrived. Is this related to Labatius or something like that? The drag queen from RuPaul's Drag Race? So actually, no, although I like her.
Or Pose even.
Yeah, but both Pose and RuPaul's Drag Race are based on the voguing culture. And this is one of the cultures that inspire me the most. But since now you are the interviewer, apparently, so you need to focus me.
Okay.
Or because I have several things to say.
So yeah, we can go all through that throughout the 4 phases that I have prepared for us. So I wanted, first of all, my first question.
Are you copying my methods?
Maybe. I don't know. I've been sitting aside and watching for a long time, so maybe.
He is a quick learner, I have to say. Yes. But we didn't tell them how we met each other and how. Okay.
Oh yeah. Do you want to tell them how we met?
For our cat. Let's say that in some way.
Or do you want to keep it as a tease for the end of the episode?
Good idea. But you know what people sometimes tell me? That, especially the Hebrew listeners, that they say, you said so many times in that episode that you will talk about this and that, and you didn't. I just went to and talked about other things. But now
let's try to focus more. So officially, my first question was going to be, is that how is it to be interviewed in your own podcast?
Oh, finally.
You've been waiting for this day for a long time.
Look, I have to say, sometimes people think that the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing, and we will be talking about it more in depth with other questions that you prepared. But sometimes people think that the reason I'm doing the things I'm doing is because I want to become a celebrity or something like that, or I want to be a radio host or a TV host. Well, this was not the plan. I never thought that I'm going to work in being a professional homosexual.
That's a great statement.
The idea of this whole thing, this Mother Has a Right, actually, my dream is to develop a startup, a technological solution. I came up with the idea already around the year of 2015, 16. And then I started to connect with more and more activists and entrepreneurs, queer in Israel. And quite quickly, I found myself advising to some of the most known activists in the country. And years before that, also, I initiated a few stuff related to legislation and many more things. Yeah. The podcast started, the Hebrew one, started because of few reasons. First of all, the idea was brought up by people who were in my lecture. Mm-hmm. My living room became a kind of a mecca where people came and brought their friends because they wanted to hear the lecture. And at some time, I lived with flatmates. It was too much. And some of the people who could not arrive, back then I lived in the city center of Tel Aviv. And there were quite many people that could not arrive exactly at the same time, or people who don't live nearby. And the request actually for producing a podcast came by the people who were in that lecture. That lecture is somehow related to the book, mm-hmm. which I'm writing and I really want to publish. And this all led, so it started with a book, still in progress, a lecture, mm-hmm. articles, posts. I tried to make a video series, and I have no background in production. And then I saw that, podcast is probably, it is easier to produce than doing a video. So this is how it started.
So basically the English version is more global, the one that we're now talking on.
Yeah.
Straight Friendly Global.
Yeah.
So you interviewed a lot of really interesting people about amazing subjects that not necessarily a lot of the LGBTQ organizations or the media itself talks about. So for example, one episode was about the free LGBT zones in Poland, one about Turkey, one about the LGBTQ community.
You did a good preparation, Mr. Jonathan.
Of course I did.
Keep going. I'm enjoying.
About the LGBTQ community in India, about digital content with the amazing Scott Gatz from the US with Queerty and all of his amazing content. So what made you want to actually present these different voices and not just talk about typical gay stuff that is going on in Israel? Why the global issue?
Well, first of all, since I was a child, I was always interested about cultures. Also during my military service, I was in foreign affairs, and because I wanted to get there. So I was always curious about that. Actually, before working on LGBT issues, my passion was about dealing with, believe it or not, about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Mm-hmm. During 2016, when it was the second Lebanon war.
2006.
2006, yes. So I was actually I was sitting in my balcony and a rocket fell just in front of me. Mm-hmm. I was really lucky that it was an old rocket and it did not explode, but I could see death in the eyes. Like I thought I'm dead for some time. And that moment changed my life. That moment, I had a blog before then, but then I realized that like, I started to write about it in my blog that became viral. Back then I was 15 years old, and it was in the one
So
of
you
the,
always had this content creator in you.
in some way. I always was an activist. After that event, much more. I appreciated more life, let's say.
Yeah.
And with my agenda, I use different tools in order to achieve my goals. And content is one of the tools. Just like as opening business is another tool.
Mm-hmm.
Technology can be another tool. Politics is something which I'm really trying to not to deal with politics, but sometimes I do, because this is just one of the other tools.
Yeah.
But that event, what is so interesting about that event made me to ask many questions, because back then I had no idea why we have conflict, who were the people that almost killed me,
Mm-hmm.
and some of the people who I knew from my neighborhood. And once I started to ask questions, I went to some program. It's called the Center for Humanistic Education, developed by Raya Kalisman, who's one of my biggest mentors, and I advise with her a lot also about the podcast. Mm-hmm. And she formed a place in the Holocaust Museum in Kibbutz Lochamei HaGetaot, the Ghetto Fighters Museum. She established there a center where they take both Israeli Jews and Israeli Palestinians, Arabs, and they teach about the pain of the other side, about the Holocaust and about the Nakba, mm-hmm. about the disasters. Not in order to say that it's similar or anything, it's about understanding the pain of the other side. If we want to really talk or make change, so we know we must learn how to listen.
Of course. And
for the pain as well. And I think that what happened, I started to be activer, and I completely changed my opinions and thoughts. And starting that age of 15, I started to participate in many delegations and conferences around the world, and then also helping to develop some of them. For instance, and I was in so many countries, and for instance, in one there were like, I think people both from Armenia and Azerbaijan and Kosovo and Serbia, Israeli, Palestinians, Italian and German, many countries, Russia, Ukraine. And with dealing with it, I have realized that many times it was easier for me to talk with LGBT persons, especially gay ones, from other countries, because we immediately could understand each other. I started to realize that there is kind of identity, if we will call it like that. There is some experience which is mutual to people who were born, lived, and educated in different areas around the world.
Yeah, some similarities in our stories.
Exactly, and I almost went to do a PhD actually about international education, focused about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I would say something that some people would not love. I have friends also from Gaza Strip, from the West Bank. I was traveling in some of the areas, and I was really lucky. I met at the age of 17 girls from Iran in an educational conference. So I felt like I was very lucky to gain some knowledge and experience, which I felt that I must not just share it with others, but scream it.
Yeah.
And there are many things that I learned there that I found, wow, if people within the LGBT communities could use the same practices. If I would have done the PhD, it would be about how to make encounters between people who come from different backgrounds, but like very extreme. Not only how, let's say, if you open a school in New York and how you can introduce between both black and white people and talk about, the issues, but also with like people from conflicts that are happening now, like the Israeli-Palestinian one.
Yeah, so I do want to take you there to the stories that you bring to the podcast. That one of the goals that you set at Mother Has Arrived and at Straight Friendly Global is basically to create, empower, and connect. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you is basically to take you a little bit back. You talked a little bit about your childhood, growing up in Naharia, and one of the amazing things, and one of the first episodes that you basically published on Straight Friendly Global was about the LGBT life in Russia. And I want us to take a minute and a half to listen to a short clip from that episode that you basically interviewed Bella Rapport. And there she talked about her research about gender and lesbian in Russia and about her struggle to talk with her own university in order to make them accept this topic. So let's listen to this clip, and then we will return to talk about you, Michael, because this episode is all about you.
Me.
So
I had so much troubles with that because I started to write it on the anthropology department in European University in St. Petersburg, and they wouldn't let me, they just wouldn't let me write my dissertation there. They didn't approve my topic. That's why I had to switch several places and start from the scratch in sociology. And but now I'm actually pretty happy that it happened like that, because it just took all my blood from me, this process of fighting with my faculty and switching the universities and stuff like that. But now I see that my faculty, they just couldn't handle this subject because they were so obsolete, and they just couldn't handle the gender topic, and my research couldn't happen there. I've been asking lesbian couples because I'm pretty much interested how lesbian gender constructs and how it is expressed in the language, because we don't have a lot of lesbian things in the mass culture of Russia. So lesbians, they have to invent their own language in some contexts, or to use some euphemisms or something like that, and they derive the gender stereotypes from heterosexist culture, and they transform it to something new, or maybe not that new in their relationship, and it fascinates me.
Yeah, so basically the reason that I chose this part of the full
I thought
episode,
for a moment it was you. When you talking, I thought it was me. Coming back,
yeah. So it kind of reminded me a little bit about your story. You talk a lot about your personal story growing up in Naharia, to a family that fled from the Soviet Union to Israel and made Aliyah, and on how you grew up in this family, in like this Russian culture family that basically wasn't really easy.
So what is the question?
My question is it's not more of a question, it's more of an observation, and I thought that we could talk about of this. Yes, it was a struggle, like Bella said, it was a huge struggle fighting with this heteronormative around even the academia in Russia, and how she eventually didn't let herself to lose interest and not to stop fighting about it. And that's one of the things that you do to connect, empower, and create. So that's why it kind of reminded me a lot of your personal story, and I wanted to hear more about it.
So let's start for a second about this whole motto, which is written almost everywhere. This thing which I initiated, a kind of mission of values or actions, but it says create, empower, and connect. The idea behind that is what I'm trying to create with this initiative is eventually to create a platform. When saying create, it's not just about creating a content. It's about any kind of creation, forming an organization, doing the things that Bella did in her university. It's about creating. And I think it's super, super important. Many times I talk about our hidden history, about the fact that this discourse that we know these days about LGBTQ and plus is kind of new. Of course, having same-sex practices or love, I think we talk too much about sex and not love, by the way. It was always part of our nature, but this whole discourse is finally getting open. The reason for me it was really important that one of the first episodes would be about Russia. And we have also another episode. The first ever episode I recorded in English was about Turkey. The reasons for that, what I found similar about both Turkey and both Russia, is the fact that in these two countries, the situation for the LGBT communities went backwards. It's getting worse there. And I think that this is a very important statement and thing that we should all think about, because I hear so many times how people take for granted the lives that we have today in terms of acceptance of our communities, both in countries like Israel, the United States, and Western Europe. And I don't think that the change has completed, not at all. And even more than that, the fact that we see achievements doesn't mean that some regimes cannot take it backwards. So like we always will have to fight for our rights. And I think this is very, very important. We cannot be ignorant about that. So this is why the episode about Russia and both Poland, they were both very important, and Turkey. This is what's similar about them. So we will not take things as granted. And I would say many times while working with LGBT activists, both here in Israel and also in other countries, I felt many times that I was in different forums where people could not understand me.
Yeah.
There's one example that I gave how when more than a decade ago I was volunteering with queer youth, how some of the instructors that were volunteering with me, so they were really pushing on her to come outside of the closet, and she came from a Russian-speaking background. And I really tried to say, hey, look, you have to understand that this culture is different than what you know. The fact that your families accept you doesn't mean necessarily that it will be the truth for others. And we have a lot of responsibility about that. And I think that also, many times I think that homophobia or LGBT phobia, just like any other phobias or phobia, anti-Semitism, phobia of Palestinians, phobia of Lebanese, or
everyone loves us.
The food, yes. I love everyone, really.
And the Lebanese Arabic is amazing, by the way. So.
But I wanted just to say and to sum up that, in my opinion and from my experience, the reason for hate comes from fear. And the reason for fear, many times, is lack of knowledge. If we don't know about something, so our natural reaction would be to be afraid of that. It's like going to travel in some new destination without having your guidebook.
Yeah.
And I think this is why I'm an educator eventually. I use different methods. But I really believe in education, and education, unlike other aspects, education takes a lot of time. It can take generations. We cannot see the change immediately. Yeah. Although what I so love about the podcast, that sometimes, as you can see, we get different comments and emails from people saying how it affected them. So I love what we do.
Yeah, and you can see that you love what you're doing, because you do get an amazing stories, and you do get to an interesting people around the world to share their own creations and creativity, and talk about their personal lives and what made them, they're not professional gays as you would expect them to be, but they're more of people who are just, looking to let other people understand them and understand their perspective, and to kind of accept. It's like kind of destroying stereotypes.
Yeah, for me, it's also very important. We said create, empower, and connect. For me, also, it's super crucial what kind of creation people do. Mm-hmm. For me, as growing up, and also these days, the images of the gay people, for instance, that we see in media, in gay parties, are usually that type of very thin, like 0% of fat, lots of muscles, some kind of, and this is not something empowering in my opinion. The content and the people who are interesting for me to work with are the people who are doing content or different kinds of creations that are there in order to empower the communities and its allies. And many times there are lots of businesses that, they suddenly once a year during Pride Month, they hang the rainbow flag, or they change the color of their logo. But then if you check, do they employ transgender people, for instance, or people of color? And then you see that in some way our communities are being used by some forces. So it was a note which was important for me to mention.
That's really interesting. And I think it do lead us to our next point, that I want to take you to this journey I said at the beginning, of like some sort of steps. And the next step is basically talk a little bit about this like gay, in quotes, like the gay revolution. And a lot of people point this revolution as it started at Stonewall, and it has a really great platform on your lecture as well, speaking about it and how it did affect not just in the US, but it did affect us here in the Middle East. It did affect a lot of countries in Europe. And I want us to listen to a short clip from the interview that you did with Jeffrey Masters.
Oh, wow.
The legendary Jeffrey Masters. And this clip where you played him another clip. So this is a clip inside of a clip. Inside of a clip.
I feel like I'm in Matrix.
So at the beginning of this clip, you played an audio section from Jeffrey Masters' interview with Mark Siegel. He's a Stonewall veteran. And then I wanted to leave Jeffrey's notes about it, because I think it's super interesting to talk about. So let's just play the part, and we will continue from there.
Right from the beginning, we started organizing. That includes from the street, writing on the street tomorrow night, to the third or fourth or fifth night, I don't remember which, where we had leaflets on the street saying, we're not going to allow the police to oppress us anymore. This is our neighborhood. That's what is so revolutionary. That was in itself illegal. When we gathered at the steps of Stonewall, that was illegal. Homosexuals could not congregate together. That was illegal. When we said we were going to fight the police, that was illegal. Everything we did in that first year was basically illegal, and we wouldn't be stopped. We were going to be out, loud, proud, and don't even try to stop us.
One of the things I love about that clip is that he's explaining Stonewall, but this is a uprising that lasted, 3 days, 4 days. There's like different discrepancies there, but it lasted a number of days. And I love that it was, purposeful. It wasn't just like a fire. It wasn't like Hanukkah where the candle burned for 8 days, right? This was like something we continued to like keep lighting to make sure it lasted for those 3 or 4 days by like forcing the issue and making it to be a big event, like purposefully to like show our power. And so him writing with chalk along the streets of the West Village, meet at Stonewall tonight, 5 p.m. Like that dispensing of information to me, like that's like the modern day tweeting, right? Meet here tonight. It's like a small phrase, 140 characters. And just like, I love the thoughtfulness of like, this is a big deal. Let's make it an even bigger deal to show something.
So what made you actually kind of put Stonewall as one of the major events that happened in the gay revolution?
Oh, wow. I think that this is the most known event. And many times when I was reading on Wikipedia or books or wherever resources I could find, so many times it's like the history starts there. And I think that it is a very important event that we should all know about, but this is not the only event, and there were different events that happened before. For me, also like in my lectures, I'm trying to show also the background to what maybe allowed these demonstrations to happen. For instance, the connection to the death of the singer Judy Garland, who back in those days showed her support for her fans, that some of them were openly gay. Back then, it was not something that we can take for granted. But many people, including me until a few years ago, we know, like we were marching in those pride events, and many times not thinking or not remembering the shoulders of our ancestors, which we are all standing on their shoulders. It's like all layers. I think also what allowed the Stonewall riots to happen, I think there was also a lot of luck. Both luck, but also...
Yeah, well, they didn't have Twitter, Facebook, or stuff like that to just, post a post and make a video like, hey, guys, come here at this time and this time. Like even Jeffrey talked about it. It was like a chalk on the street.
Yeah. It leads me to the second point, that there's a lot of importance of media and communication. That event, maybe if in that year it was not even enough communicated in the US and also in other countries, but definitely the year after that there was the first parade commemorating the Stonewall events. And I think media has a lot to do. We were talking about different tools that we can use for activism. And I think that media is, these days, there are more people watching television rather than reading, for instance. Mm-hmm. And it can be an opportunity to see different cultures. I'm so lucky that where I grew up during the 90s, that there was TV. So I could see in that small device, in that small screen, some kind of life and values, which probably otherwise I wouldn't know about their existence. Mm-hmm. So I think the whole role of media is super important. This is why we are also dealing with media, and people who do media are very interesting for us. And it's a tool that can make a very important change, not just change in the world, but also change of justice. Mm-hmm. Because many times the power in countries is usually being held by some very strong clubs, and media allows us to make content accessible not only within the people with the power, the people who control countries, for instance, or control economy, finance, but media allows us to get to many more people who maybe also live outside of the big cities, mm-hmm. outside of where the power is. And I think this is super, super important.
So we can basically say that this is what made you kind of create this business or this enterprise that is mainly about media and about connecting people and about being visible.
Yeah, and in the future also a technological solution as well. Yes, to make things much more accessible, to create a platform. Originally, the podcast, I didn't want to be the host. I think I told you that
Surprise!
once. Like I had a dream that we will create many podcasts, different, like one gay, one lesbian, one maybe about religion, one about economy and queer and so on. It didn't happen. I really tried to push for it. But also there were no budgets and stuff. And basically I had to fire myself and leave the work where I was. And I basically used all my savings in order to create and achieve this stuff. Yeah. But in my opinion, I believe that as many voices that we can have, it's for our benefit. It's not a good situation when we have only few people who are either in power or people who have a stage where they can talk. So nobody agreed to at the beginning to.
Now everyone wants it.
So, but it's something similar with some of the other activists that I know also in other fields, that they say we did it because nobody else did, and we felt like, and I felt like, if I will not do it, so it will not happen, or it will happen by somebody else in too many years. So I just
or they wouldn't do it right.
I don't know what if there is right or wrong. Once again, I think that there should be as much more, and I know I trust the people to find what they find relevant for themselves. But I am definitely trying to raise some voice that for me as a teenager I didn't have, and many times when I was looking for role models, I couldn't find them. And this is why it's called Mother Has Arrived. I'm not necessarily the mother. I'm one of the mothers. But this beautiful culture of the voguing and the houses, the fact that almost anyone could become a mother is super, super important. And I think that all of us, we have responsibility. Each one of us knows people. Maybe some of the people who are listening now, they're working as teachers or even receptionists in a hotel. The way that they will behave with LGBT people, or even just people who are not LGBT but are in lack of knowledge and full of bad thinking about the people, probably every person on earth has a family member, rather if outside of the closet or inside the closet. And heteronormative people don't have to think about it. And also for us, growing up in a heteronormative society, it also shapes ourselves.
Yeah.
So each one of us can make the change. If we hear anyone saying, using the word gay as a curse, so each one of us should say something and not allow it to happen.
So I think this is an amazing conclusion for the first part of this episode.
This was another episode of Straight Friendly Global. You can find more episodes and listen to our podcast on your favorite listening app, such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Echo Podcasts, Alexa Media Player, Google Podcasts, and so on.